Some housekeeping items before we get started. You have a slide in front of you now with information about how to join by the Cal EPA webcast. As I mentioned, we have so many people joining us today that Zoom webinar just can't hold everyone. So we ask that you exit the Zoom webinar and take yourself to the Cal EPA webcast platform, which is on the link shown on the slide before you, or you can take out your phone and scan the QR code that's on the screen. You will still be able to ask us questions today. I have more information about that on the next couple of slides. So please bear with us as we try to learn this new system and this new platform for delivering this webinar. So with that, Marion, could you take us to the next slide, please? All right. As I mentioned, thank you so much for your patience, everyone. On behalf of the California Department of Toxic Substances Control, or DTSC, and the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, or CDTFA, I'd like to welcome you to our webcast about the fiscal year 2023-24 hazardous waste fees. The purpose of today's webcast is to provide a high-level overview of the fee payment process and how to correct your manifests. Presentation slides for this event will be available online at dtsc.ca.gov/fees-events. After this webcast, they'll be posted online. The recording itself will also be posted. At that link is already a handout available to you to give you an overview of the generation and handling fee. Please know that by participating in this event, you understand that it will be recorded and posted online. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so today's webcast includes a presentation by DTSC. We'll then break for a short lunch at approximately noon, and then reconvene around 12:30 to hear from CDTFA. Don't worry, there's going to be an opportunity to ask questions following each of these presentations, and we understand that with this webcasting platform and the thousands of people that are joining us today, we know this information is important to you and you have a lot of questions. So as we shift from our more familiar Zoom webinar to the platform over at the Cal EPA webcasting system, we recognize that this changes how we interact. So to help with this, I have on the slide here a different QR code than we used previously. This QR code and the link shown here is how you're going to be able to submit your questions and your comments to us today. We want to hear from you. By taking out your phone and scanning this QR code, the new DTSC webpage where you can actually submit your questions to us. That will be tracked in a form that we have so we can follow up with your questions today to the best of our abilities. And after the webcast, if we can't get to everything today. We do want you to know that, again, because there are so many people joining us today, we probably won't be able to get to your specific situation or questions about your specific site or your facility, but we are going to follow up with you. And actually, the questions you ask might be asked by a lot of other people. So we're going to do our best to find as many of those unique questions as we can that's most relevant to as many of you as possible. Please know that we are going to follow up with you, even if it's not today. So with that, I'm going to have this slide up for just a couple more seconds to give you a chance to scan the QR code and get that comment form ready. And then we'll get started with some introductions. All right, 3, 2, 1. Marion, if you could take us to our next slide. All right, so without further ado, my name is Gabby Nepomuceno, and I am the Assistant Deputy Director in our Office of Legislation and Regulatory Review. I'll be today's facilitator. Today's presenters include Catherine Grant, Fiscal Policy and Process Improvement Manager in DTSC's Office of Financial Planning, Cindy Gill, Business Operations Unit Manager in DTSC's Office of Environmental Information Management, and Angela DiMiola-Leach, Business Tax Specialist with CDTFA's Business Tax and Fee Division. So with that, Kate, would you like to get us started? You're on mute.
Yes, thanks, Gabby. My apologies. Next slide, please. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm Catherine Grant. I'm the Fiscal Policy and Process Improvement Manager here at DTSC. I appreciate the time you've taken And we recognize there are a lot of questions, particularly about the generation and handling fee, what it is, what it does, and if it's relevant to you as a generator. We aim to answer those questions here today. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with today's agenda. Next slide, please. Today, I'd like to provide you all with an overview of the generation and handling fee, kind of the mechanics of it. What is it? What's it fund? How is it established? And are there any exemptions or exclusions to this fee? I'd also like to discuss with you all the roles and responsibilities of the generator. Then I'll hand it over to Cindy Gill to provide an overview of how you can monitor and track, as well as verify your data, and then correct your data if necessary. Next slide, please. So what is the generation and handling fee? The generation and handling fee was established through Reform Bill SB 158 in 2021 to create an equitable fee framework for all hazardous waste generators. It combined 4 fees: the manifest user fee, the EPID fee, the disposal fee, and the generator fee into one single flat rate fee system. Prior to reform, generators were paying several fees, each with its own fee framework. The idea was to simplify the fee structure and create hazardous waste fees, wherein those that generate the waste pay the cost to regulate and oversee the waste from cradle to grave. This includes DTSC's overhead and oversight responsibilities as a regulatory agency. It was intended to be a more equitable fee system for all. Under the previous fee, particularly the generator fee, the most analogous fee to the generation and handling fee, some of the largest quantity generators were paying less per ton than others. So you had a sizable range between generators, where our largest generators were paying sometimes less than $10 per ton, and some of our smaller generators were paying up to $100 per ton. The generation and handling fee was intended to remedy that and create a more equitable fee system so that all generators pay the same amount per ton, creating a fair framework for everyone. The generation and handling fee is assessed on generators who produce 5 or more tons of waste in the prior calendar year. It's important to note that because this is a significant shift from our prior fee structure, wherein you paid fees during the year the waste was generated, and then filed a return the following February. The generation and handling fee is not structured in this way, and we'll discuss more about this on a further slide when we talk about how rates are set. Additionally, the generation and handling fee is administered and collected by the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration on behalf of DTSC. Qualifying generators must register and pay, as well as file a return with CDTFA, not DTSC, to be in compliance with these fees. Next slide, please. Now, before we dive into the specifics about the generation and handling fee, let's first talk about what a generator is. In front of you, you have your health and safety code, your California Code of Regulations. But what that essentially means is a generator is any person by site who produces hazardous waste or causes waste to be subject to regulation. If you have additional questions related to generator requirements, you can contact DTSC's Regulatory Assistance Office. With that, the generation and handling fee is applicable to all regulated hazardous waste in California, with few exceptions, which we will discuss later. Slide 9, please. Now let's talk about how the generation and handling fee is set. The generation and handling fee is set annually by the Board of Environmental Safety to match the amount appropriated by the legislature plus a prudent reserve capped at 10% of our appropriation. The rate is set to take into consideration the amount of applicable hazardous waste tonnage generated in the prior calendar year against the revenues needed to sustain the operational level provided by the legislature. It's assessed on the waste generated in the previous calendar year and paid in 2 equal installments. This means for the current fiscal year, 23-24, the fee is due on waste generated in 2022. So when I say fiscal year, that specifically means from July 1 of 2023 to June 30th of 2024. and the fees are going to be paid on the waste generated in the calendar year of 2022. I know this is a bit confusing because, as I mentioned earlier, under the previous fee structure, there was a very little lag time between the time the waste was generated and the time the fee was due. And this is a significant change for everyone. One of the things we noticed is last year, a number of generators who paid the fiscal year 22-23 waste, or excuse me, fiscal year, paid in the wrong fiscal year. A lot of generators last year actually paid on calendar year waste 2022, which was not subject to the rate. At that time, it was the same rate, it was subject to the 49.25, but it was for calendar year waste 2021. So this is incorrect, and we encourage anyone who may have paid 22 calendar year waste last year to work with CDTFA to amend your returns to reflect payment of the fees for the correct fiscal year. So to reiterate, current year 23-24 waste is assessed on calendar year 2022 waste, and prior year 22-23 is due on waste generated in calendar year 2021. For additional details on the generation and handling fee payment schedule, please see the generation and handling fee handout on DTSC's website, as well as CDTFA's website. Payments are due, as I said before, in 2 equal installments. The first installment for waste generated in calendar year 2022 was due November of 2023. The second installment, as well as the return, is due next month in February of 2024. Next slide, please. With that, let's talk about where the money goes and what does it fund. The revenues are deposited into the Hazardous Waste Control Account. This account is what funds the hazardous waste management oversight and regulatory activities of both DTSC and CDTFA. Some of these activities include inspections, enforcement, waste evaluation, regulatory assistance, as well as administrative costs. Next slide, please. With that, there are some exclusions and exemptions from DTSC's generation and handling fees. Some of these are intended to avoid fees being paid on the same waste twice. And it's important to know what these are so that you're aware of what waste you generate is and is not subject to fees. Hazardous waste generated that can be excluded from the generation and handling fee calculation includes hazardous waste transferred, stored, or bulk through a treatment, storage, and disposal facility en route to a destination facility. Additionally, hazardous materials recycled or reused on site and not transferred off site is also excluded. Lastly, aqueous waste treated in a treatment unit under either conditional exemption, conditional authorization, or permit by rule is also excluded. Now let's move on to exemptions. Next slide, please. There are several exemptions for the generation and handling fee. Hazardous waste exempt from the fee includes waste generated from household hazardous waste collection facilities, banned, outdated, unregistered agricultural waste submitted to a county under a collection program, as well as do-it-yourself or used oil, we call it DIY oil, that is collected by a certified used oil collection center is exempt from the fee. But the hazardous waste generated by the used oil collection center is subject to the fee. Slide 13, please. Some additional exemptions are hazardous waste generated by solid waste load check operations is exempt, along with reusable soil textile materials that meet specified conditions. Waste generated by government agencies responding to releases of waste caused by others is exempt. However, the entity responsible for the release of the waste is subject to the fee. Therefore, we ask qualifying government entities to assist DTSC and CDTFA with identifying and seeking collection from the responsible. Please note, eligibility for an exemption is not affected by whether DTSC can collect from the responsible party. So for instance, when a government entity responding to an unforeseen cleanup, such as an emergency response activity or illegal dumping, DTSC requests be notified of the responsible entity when fees are due, so we can seek collection from that responsible party. And our last exemption is hazardous waste generated by a natural disaster, which is not a routinely produced hazardous waste, is also exempt. Slide 14, please. So who pays the generation and handling fee this fiscal year, 23-24? Well, as we discussed earlier, every generator who produced 5 or more tons of hazardous waste in calendar year 2022 is subject to the fee, barring any exemptions or exclusions, of course. And again, I want to reiterate, if you paid your fees on calendar year 2022 rate last year, please work with CDTFA to amend your returns. Prior year fees were due on waste produced in calendar year 2021, and current year fees are due on waste produced in calendar year 2022. The current rate is set at $49.25 per ton, or fraction per ton. This is an important nuance because the generation and handling fee is not prorated. So if you generated 5.5 tons of hazardous waste, you won't pay half of $49.25. You'll pay that $49.25 6 times because, again, the rate is not prorated per statute. I want to convey that to all our generators out there because your CDTFA return will calculate the fees due. And I want to make sure you're aware of this nuance. Next slide, please. So with that, let's move on to the roles and responsibilities of the generator. Generators are required to register, pay, and file the return with CDTFA on an annual basis. Please work with CDTFA on the specific status of your account. As a generator, you are responsible for managing and tracking the hazardous waste at your site. This includes managing the information related to the type of waste generated, as well as the quantity of waste generated, and maintaining appropriate records for the appropriate duration of time as dictated by either federal, state, or local statutes, regulations, codes, and ordinances. It is your responsibility as a generator to maintain these records and calculate the fees you owe each fiscal year. Generators are also responsible for reporting to DTSC business and generation information in various reporting systems, such as the electronic verification questionnaire and the transporter quarterly report, among others. Generators must validate the tonnage and generation information in various tracking systems. It's your responsibility to make sure the information about your business is clear. Our next presenter, Cindy Gill, will talk more about the hazardous waste tracking system and manifest corrections. Next slide. And with that, I will return you to Gabby.
Thank you, Kate. So thank you for that overview of the generation and handling fee. We'll pause here for a moment to show the Q&A form again. For those of you who joined after the introductions, you can type this link into your browser, or you can scan the QR code with your phone to open up the form. After this segment about the manifest correction process, we'll open up the Q&A session about both DTSC presentations. Next slide, please, and I'll hand it over to Cindy.
Thanks, Gabby. As Gabby mentioned earlier, introduced me, I'm Cindy Gill. I'm with the Business Operations Unit, and I'm the manager, and I'm under the Office of Environmental Information Management. I'll be going over the manifest correction process. This includes information about the department's hazardous waste tracking system and how to verify your generated tonnage in HWTS. I'll end with the annual ID number verification questionnaire, which is one of the reporting requirements for generators. Next slide, please. Many of you may already be familiar with the hazardous waste tracking system. It's short for HWTS. If not, I'll give you an overview. This is the home page. HWTS is a data repository for ID number and hazardous waste manifest information. It captures manifested waste data only. Unmanifested waste data, such as treated wood waste or universal waste, isn't captured in HWTS. All the information in HWTS can be viewed and downloaded by the public without having a user account. So user accounts are only for regulators. Examples of what can be viewed are your ID number, profile information. You can also download images of your manifest. HWTS also contains pre-built reports that's available to the public. If you click on the reports icon, you'll see a list of the reports. Examples of reports include transporter profiles, yearly tonnage reports. If you'd like to request a custom report, email HWTSAD, M like Mike, N like Nancy at DTSC.ca.gov. And this email address will be available on the next slide. So that's HWTSADMN at DTSC.ca.gov. Next slide, please. Industry and regulators, with the exception of DTSC staff with the appropriate permissions, cannot make changes to the data in HWTS. So changes in the data, changes to the ID number information, and any non-manifest data changes can be requested by emailing HWTS-ADMN. There's no I in there. An example of a non-manifest data change would be a typo in your business name, or if your company's city or county is incorrect. And depending on the change you're requesting, we may instruct you to complete a form. We'll let you know which one. I'll go over manifest data changes in another slide. Next slide, please. So now we'll talk about how to verify your generated manifest tonnage in HWTS. First, enter your ID number into the search box. Searching by the ID number is recommended. For those of you that received the recent generation and handling fee letter, your ID number is on the letter. It has a prefix of CA. If you don't know your ID number, you can search by your site or company name. You'll click on the View Profile button when the ID number displays in the search results. Next slide, please. You'll be directed to your ID number profile page here. Next slide, please. Scroll all the way down to the section titled Manifest Counts and Total Tonnage. If the ID number was used on a hazardous waste manifest, the data will be displayed here. Click on the respective year to view the manifest details. The G&H fee only pertains to tons from the generated column. Do note that the total tonnage on the informational generation and handling fee letter that we send periodically may not match the generated tonnage in HWTS. And this is because HWTS data shows all of the tonnage in which your ID number was listed on a manifest. Not all manifested waste is subject to the G&H fee. Next slide, please. This is the view after you click on the respective year. If you click on the manifest number, you can preview, download, or print your manifest. Next slide, please. So now we'll talk about the manifest corrections process. If you find a discrepancy on your manifest, here's what you need to do. There are two ways to inform us. First option is, and recommended for a more immediate response, is to email manifestcorrections@dtsc.ca.gov. The other option is to send us a manifest correction letter. The correction letter instructions are available at this link, and this PowerPoint will be available. After we have reviewed your email or correction letter, we may make the corrections for you depending on what needs to be corrected. For example, when there are data translation issues between the Federal Workwear Info System and HWTS, we'll make those types of corrections. If we have you make the corrections, we'll provide instructions on how to do so. Next, let's talk about the annual hazardous waste ID number verification questionnaire. Next slide, please. So as Kate mentioned about in her slide about the generator rules and responsibilities, I do want to note that the annual verification questionnaire is just one requirement from generator, so it's not limited to just the verification questionnaire. You may have other requirements as a generator. I would check with your Coupa. You can feel free and also send us an email as well to HWTS admin to find out if there are other reporting requirements within DTSC that you may need to comply with. So an overview of the ID number verification questionnaire. The questionnaire is required by regulations. It's completed annually. And the questionnaire is filed electronically through the EVQ system. And typically, the cycle launches sometime in July or after. There should be a or on that side. We do routine maintenance and enhancements. So after the report cycle ends, we'll close it and then it'll relaunch again. So currently, the 2023 report cycle is closed. Next slide, please. Here are some EVQ resources. You see the web page, the homepage there, our email address, and then we have a telephone line that's open from 9 to 3, Monday through Fridays, with the exception of state holidays. We'll post a training video and update the user guide when the new report cycle launches. I will hand it back to Gabby. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Let's go to our next slide. Alrighty, so now we are in the Q&A period for the DTSC presentation portion of today's webcast. To facilitate the questions, we'll first go to those that we received in advance of today, and then we'll go to the questions that we received during these presentations. I do see a lot of them coming in. Quite a few of them I recognize are about the logistics of going from the Zoom webinar to the webcast and the technical difficulties we had today. So over the lunch break at about noon to 12:30, I'll be sifting through those questions to try to find ones that are going to be most relevant to today's live portion of the webcast. But in the meantime, please take note that we will be posting this recording online at our Fees Events webpage. So it will be available to you after today. The slide deck will also be posted online for you to reference. So those things are coming. Again, because of the technical difficulties we've had so far, we really do appreciate your patience with us, and we are going to try to get to as many questions as we can in this first segment up to noon, and then when we come back after CDTFA's presentation. So with that, let's go to our first question. Cindy and Kate, can I ask you to come on camera, please? All right. Okay, so our first question today, a generator has asked, I need to renew my EPA ID number. How do I do that? Cindy, this sounds like a question that might be to you.
That's correct, Gabby. This is a good question and a very common question. For state ID numbers with a lettered prefix of CAL, you would need to complete the DTSC Form 1358. If you have a federal ID number with a lettered prefix of CAD or CAR, you would complete the EPA Form 8700-12 electronically or by paper. We recommend electronically. Do note that only permanent ID numbers are eligible for reactivation. If the EVQ report cycle is open and provided that your site address hasn't changed, you can request reactivation in one of the verification steps. And then for more detailed instructions, this information is also provided on the DTSC webpage at dtsc.ca.gov, and it's /reactivate -EPA-ID -number and /. You're probably not going to remember that, so we'll have to provide that in our materials after the webinar.
Great, thank you. Okay. Our next question is, I'm a consolidated transporter, not a generator. Am I responsible for paying the fee? For this one, I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
Thanks, Gabby. No, consolidated transporters are not expected to pay the generation and handling fee. The consolidator is only listed as the generator for purposes of filling out the manifest form. The original generator is responsible for paying fees on the waste generator. However, The consolidator must provide receipts to the original generator so they have documentation on what to pay.
All right, so it sounds like a lot of generators, their waste is picked up by these consolidated transporters. So for the transporter, must there be a single consolidated manifest?
Assuming the wastes are compatible and allowed to be mixed in one container, then yes, for health and safety code, the consolidator transporter must complete one consolidated manifest. If you're using the consolidated manifesting procedure, there are other requirements besides the completion of the manifest. So please contact the transporter unit at transporter@dtsc.ca.gov if you have questions about what else is required.
Okay, great. So now from the generator perspective, a lot of these people who use consolidated transporters are actually people who have asbestos abatement done in their homes. So if they received a notice from DTSC for waste they generated in 2022, do they pay the fee?
If they generated more than 5 tons of hazardous waste, yes. But if they generated less than 5 tons, then no. They would be exempt from paying the fee. The fee is only applicable to generators who generate 5 or more tons of waste.
Got it. Okay, so one of the questions we get commonly is from homeowners who say, well, I only had a few bags of asbestos picked up. That doesn't sound like 5 tons. So what should the homeowner do in that case?
I'll take that question, Gabby. So if it's an issue with the manifest, the first step is to email manifest corrections@dtsc.ca.gov. In your email, include as much information as you can, your name, address, ID number, the company that did your waste removal, and any documentation or pictures that shows the amount of waste that was removed. So that could be in the form of a bill of lading or a weight slip. And then our manifest corrections analyst will review your case and take it from there.
Okay, and Cindy, while I have you, if nothing's changed from last year, does the generator still need to do an EVQ?
Yes, you'll still be required to complete the EVQ, and because it's an annual verification questionnaire, and as I mentioned earlier, it's required by regulations. Even if your contact information hasn't changed, your amount of waste that you generate each year is different. You'll need to go to the EVQ to verify your business information, number of employees, and confirm that the data from HWTS is accurate. So great question.
Okay, and so I don't know if this is going to be for Cindy or Kate, but if a business is no longer operating, do they still pay the fee? Or do they have to report into EVQ?
So if a business is no longer operating, so a couple of things that the business should consider, and I'm just speaking from the ID number standpoint, is first remember to inactivate your hazardous waste ID number. If you have a permanent one, after all the waste has been removed and transported to the respective receiving facility. Even if you notify other agencies of your closure, such as the Secretary of State, they don't notify us. So it's your responsibility to inactivate the ID number. Then I would also inform your Coupa, as they may have items for you to close out as well too. And Kate, I'll let you take the part about if they're required to pay fees.
Thanks, Cindy. So if a business generated more than 5 tons of hazardous waste and it's waste subject to the fee, the generator is still required to pay the fee. We ask the businesses to work with CDTFA on how to process their return in those circumstances.
Okay, actually, I don't know if this question is really for DTSC, but the question is about if there's a house fire or an incident that's covered by an insurance policy. Does the insurance company pay for the waste on behalf of that person?
So that's a great question. But unfortunately, it's out of DTSC's jurisdiction. Each person's coverage and their company's processes are specific to that individual's policy. It would be best for the person to contact their insurance provider to find out more information on how to pay the fee.
Got it. Okay. So switching gears a little bit, both DTSC and CDTFA recently sent out notices to generators based on the hazardous waste tracking system. Today, we went over that the generator should verify the data in EVQ, but what if they want to know more about the waste that was generated? How can they find out more information about that?
So I mentioned about the hazardous waste tracking system having manifest data, including the manifest images, so they can learn more about their generated waste there. The manifest tracks the waste from cradle to grave. If the waste was generated on their behalf, they'll need to talk with their contractor or whoever did the work to find out more about the waste that was generated.
Okay. So speaking of hazardous waste tracking system, a lot of our questions have actually been about whether or not manifested versus unmanifested waste is subject to the fee. Are they both subject to the fee?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yes, the fee is imposed on all hazardous waste generated unless it's specifically excluded or exempted, as I noted before. The statute does not delineate between manifested and unmanifested hazardous waste.
Okay. And Kate, since you're up right now, in your presentation, you mentioned that used oil also became subject to the generation and handling fee in 2021. This is a new expectation for generators, and so understandably, there have been quite a few questions about it. Can you speak a bit more about the fees owed for used oil? For instance, if I change the oil in my own car, do I have to pay the fee?
Great question. So the generation and handling fee established used oil became subject to the fee. Previously, under the generator fee, all used oil in its totality was exempt. There is an exemption in statute. It's a limited exemption for those who service their own oil. We call that do-it-yourselfer or DIY used oil. So if you're a member of the public who changed your own oil in your own car, you do not have to pay the generation and handling fee. You could bring it to a certified collection center or a household hazardous waste collection facility to be safely and properly managed. The certified collection center also does not have to pay on the DIY used oil it collects. But as I noted earlier, the collection facility does have to pay the fee on the oil it generates. So a certified collection facility isn't required to physically separate the DIY oil from the oil it generates, but they should keep records of how, each piece that they're collecting, so they know how much is exempt from the fee and how much is subject to the fee.
All righty. Okay, so recently DTSC has been contacted by some generators asking about waste that's generated in pursuit of public policy goals. Some of this could be associated with affordable housing projects or renewable energy projects. And they're wondering if all of that waste, if it's in pursuit of the state's public policy goals, if that should be exempt from the fee.
That's a great question. I would say that DTSC must bear the cost of regulatory oversight to protect public health and the environment when hazardous waste is generated, even when the hazardous waste that's generated is in pursuit of a public policy goal. There may be some cases where an extenuating circumstance warrants an exemption from the fee, such as a natural disaster. In those cases, it's best for the generator to reach out to CDTFA and DTSC to find out what options they may have. CDTFA does have an exemption request process that generators may follow if they believe they qualify for an exemption.
Okay, can you say a little bit more about the natural disaster exemption?
Sure. California's regulations outline a process for someone to claim a natural disaster exemption. If they're a victim of a natural disaster and that disaster caused hazardous waste to be generated, that person would not be required to pay the fee. That being said, if you are a generator who also becomes a natural disaster victim, the waste you normally generate is not exempt from the fee. Only the waste generated as a result of the natural disaster is exempt. So, for example, a hypothetical facility routinely generates and accumulates waste in containers. If the whole facility burned down in a qualifying natural disaster, the characterized waste would still be subject to the fee, but the waste generated as the result of the fire itself would not be subject to the fee.
Got it. I'm actually going to do a quick time check here because we're coming up on noon. I do want to be mindful of everyone's ability to have lunch today. So we're going to break now. We still have a lot of questions coming in that I want to come back to, but let's take a 30-minute break and rejoin at 12:30. At that point, we will introduce our CDTFA partners to give their presentation, and we'll do a Q&A session based on that CDTFA presentation. Assuming there's still enough time, we'll return to the remaining questions for DTSC to close out the rest of our webcast today. So we are going to break here. Please come back at 12:30 and we will see you after everyone has had a nice hearty meal. Thank you so much, everyone. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. I have on the screen here a link, or rather a QR code to the Cal EPA webcast. If you're joining us by Zoom webinar and you weren't here this morning, we did experience some technical difficulties. So we are trying out the Cal EPA webcasting platform because so many people are interested in the information today. So if you're joining by Zoom webinar, please exit the webinar itself. Take out your phone first and scan the QR code that you have on the screen here so you can be directed to the Cal EPA webcast platform and join over there. It is still a live web feed. I understand that there is a bit of an audio delay. So if you're joining by one or the other, there might be about 30 seconds between what you hear on the Zoom webinar versus what you hear on the webcast. The presentation today is being recorded, and it will be posted on our DTSC Fees Events webpage after it's been processed. The slide deck and a generation and handling fee handout are posted as well. Rather, the slide deck will be posted. We also have on the slide in front of you now a link to how you can submit your comments and feedback. So you can either type that link into your browser, it's dtsc.ca.gov/submit comments and feedback, with hyphens between those words. Or you can take your phone out and scan the QR code on the right side of your screen to bring up the Q&A form on your phone. We're using this form to manage our questions today because the webcast is not as interactive as Zoom webinar affords us. We are trying our best to manage all the questions that are coming in from the many thousands of people who are joining across the state today. So we really appreciate your patience. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Angela over at CDTFA.
Thank you, Gabby. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to go ahead and start sharing our PowerPoint. I am Angela Demiola Leach. I'm with the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. I am a business taxes specialist, and I work in the Tax Policy Bureau for CDTFA. Just saying a quick welcome back. And we're going to go ahead and proceed with our PowerPoint on the hazardous waste generation and handling fee. We can move to the next slide. So this fee is administered under the Health and Safety Code and the Revenue and Taxation Code. We'll go to the next slide. And some of this information will be repetitive. DTSC was wonderful in covering all the information earlier about generators and this fee. So just hang in there with me. Repetition is how we learn. So for a quick overview, CDTFA and DTSC do administer this fee together. As far as CDTFA is concerned, we are administering the registration, the return filing, compliance, audit, and appeals for this fee. The rate is set annually by the Board of Environmental Safety, as mentioned earlier, and BES does provide the rate to CDTFA every year by October 1st. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. The little bit of background, which was also mentioned earlier, Senate Bill 158 did enact the hazardous waste generation and handling fee and repealed the earlier generator fee. Some imposition information. The generation handling fee is imposed on a flat rate per ton or fraction of a ton, as mentioned prior, for generators of hazardous waste for each generator site that's generating 5 or more tons of hazardous waste at a site in California per calendar year. And DTSC does have the regulatory authority and is the regulatory agency responsible for determining the nature of hazardous waste, or how a particular waste stream or project qualifies for a particular exemption. And we can go to the next slide. Some of the exemptions and exclusions that we see most commonly are government cleanups, natural disaster victims, household and hazardous waste, and used oil. DTSC went into some details earlier. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And just as a reminder, generation and handling fee exemptions and exclusions are included in health and safety code, and their related regulations are adopted and interpreted by DTSC. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. And so we'll cover a little bit about reporting, because that's what you generators will do with CDTFA. All generators are required to file an annual return and pay the fee for each reporting period in 2 equal payments. And it's based on the waste produced in the calendar year prior to your reporting period. So we've got a little chart here to show more about that. And we've highlighted the waste generated in calendar year 2022. The prepayment was due in November, so on November 30th, 2023. And then coming up next month, February 28th, 2024, the return and final payment are due. I just wanted to note also that the CDTFA return reporting period is December 31st of 2023. This is what you're going to see when you go in to file your return, which we're going to go through in a few minutes. We'll show you all the screens associated with that process. And then lastly, this is a leap year. So February has 29 days. The fee is actually due on the 28th. So just wanted to make that special note for you as well. And we can move on. Great. We're going to move on to our online return filing. And online return filing is required for the generation and handling fee. So we're going to show you how you can do that, and we'll go through the process for you. So the first step in filing your generation and handling fee return is to sign into our online filing system or online services with your username and password. You can go to www.cdtfa.gov and select login. It's near the top right-hand side of the screen shown here. And then, so we'll go ahead and click on that, and it'll take us to our next screen. So this takes you to the login page where you can sign in. So if you have a username and password, you would enter it here. If you do not have a username and password, no worries. You can click on the Sign Up Now button, and that will take you through all of the prompts to set up your username and password. We also have tutorials online, so you can visit that as well. The next page that will come up for you is just an authentication page. Basically, if you're using your device for the first time to access our website or sign in, the system will prompt you to approve this, and you shouldn't see it again. We'll move on to, oh, great, we've entered our return. So that means we've logged in with our username and password, and this is the first page of our account. So this is what we call like the customer page. Under the accounts tab, you can see your accounts listed here with CDTFA. So we're going to go ahead and click on that, the second one that says hazardous waste generation and handling fee. So once we click on that, we're actually taken to the accounts page. So here we are under the recent periods tab, and it's showing us that we have a return ready to file with a due date of February 28th, 24. coming up soon. And I just wanted to note to the left-hand side, again, you'll see you're filing for the correct period. The end date was December 31st of 2023, and we are going to be reporting on waste from 2022. So let's go ahead and click on File Our Return. And that will bring us to the first page inside our return. And here we can see that we're on the Schedule G, and we really want to note that anytime in your return when you're filing and need help, we do have online filing instructions. So you can click on that link, a new window will open, and you can read through any instructions on that page that are needed. We can go to the next slide. Perfect. So there's basically three or four things you're going to want to pay attention to on this screen. There are a couple questions we're going to ask about treated wood waste. This defaults to no. So if you did have some treated wood waste in this period, you're going to click yes. And then do you have additional hazardous waste generated at other sites that are not listed below? So we're going to have an opportunity later to see how that works. So in this scenario, we're clicking yes. Down below in our Schedule G, we do have an EPA number that appears. So, and we did have gross tonnage of waste generated in 2022. So we went ahead and we entered 250 tons. And then just in case we had a last generation date during 2022, we want to put that last generation date there, or in 2023, so that we know, CDTFA knows when you stop generating waste at that site. And then once we've completed all this information, we're going to click next. Perfect. And we'll be taken to the page where we can add a site, because we said we had additional sites. So we're going to go ahead and click add a site, which will bring up an informational box. And we're going to enter all of the information particular to this site, the EPA number, the address, and our system's going to go ahead and validate the address. And you'll see a green check mark. Once that address is validated, you'll enter the associated gross tonnage of waste generated in 2022 in the box available. And then you can also answer the question, do you still generate waste at this location? If you say no, that will open up with that bottom box and ask you the last generation date for that site. Once everything is completed, you can go ahead and click add. And on the next screen, we will see the EPA number that we added. And you can go ahead and verify everything. You can add another site here by clicking add a site. And once all of the new sites have been added, you're going to go ahead and select next. So this is going to bring us to the exemption portion of the return, and we'll ask an exemption question. Do you have any exemptions to report? We don't default this in any way in the system for you, so you can click yes or no accordingly. And in our example, we're going to go ahead and click yes, that we do have an exemption. And that will take us to the exemption schedule. So in this example, we have claimed 25.5 tons of exempt waste for the first site. And this schedule is just always going to display the most common exemptions and includes a column for other exemptions. So as you can see here, we have government cleanup, natural disaster, household waste, and used oil. If you do place tonnage in the other exemption field, please provide a description, a short description of that other exemption that you're claiming for each site. Once you've put your tonnage in here, you can go ahead and click next, which will take us to the summary of reported hazardous waste generation and handling sites. So on this screen, you're going to go ahead and validate that everything is correct. You will see your gross tonnage of waste generated. You'll see the total exemptions that you've entered for each site. And then the system will automatically calculate the net tonnage for you. And as DTSC noted, the tonnage will be rounded up to the next full ton. Once we click next, we're going to be taken to our prepayment verification page. So back in November, when you went ahead and filed your prepayment, that amount's going to pre-populate here in your return. And if needed for any reason, you can go ahead and override this amount, but it will pre-populate for you. You just validate and click the next button. And we've made it to our summary. So this is going to show us our total tonnage of waste that's subject to the fee, and it will automatically calculate the total amount due and payable based on the current rate, which is 49.25. And once we've validated everything on this screen, we can go ahead and click next. Takes us to your information, which will pre-populate with your name. And the only question we need to answer on this page is, are you a paid preparer? For our example, we are not a paid preparer. So once complete, we get to submit. So now you've filed your generation and handling fee return with CDTFA. The declaration of intent will come up. You just put your password in there, click OK, as long as you agree that everything you entered is correct. And we'll move us on to our final confirmation page. You can do several things on this screen, so we wanted to highlight this for you. You can make a payment. You can print a payment voucher so that you send that in with your check. You could print a return PDF if you'd like, and that will come up in a separate window. So if you wanted to go ahead and print your confirmation and information about your return filing, you could do that and then come back and make your payment. We highly suggest on this screen to go ahead and click make a payment. And we'll show you what that next screen looks like. So I'm gonna be the perfect fee payer and make my payment now. And that brings up our payment screen. I have a choice to make. I can pay with checking or savings, or I can pay by credit card, where there will be a 2.3% service charge. And we're going to show you more about this process in just a little bit. We've had some questions about the prepayment process, so we're going to cover that as well. So we'll take you through a couple more screens that have to do with payments. And so that brings us to making a prepayment online with CDTFA. When are the prepayments due? They are due November 30th. And so we kind of are fast forwarding here with our calendar year 2023 waste generated. The next prepayment would be due November 30th of this year, 2024. And then the return and final payment for that period would be due February 28th of 2025. So we'll go ahead and jump into this process of making a prepayment. Again, you'd go to the login screen and enter your username and password. If you don't have that yet, go ahead and click sign up now. We're going to pretend we do have username and password, and we'll log right in. Again, we are on our customer page here. And we can go ahead and click on underneath accounts on our hazardous waste generation and handling fee account. So we'll click on that. And similar to the return, you can see your recent periods tab. And we're going to go ahead and click on the period ending 2024. Once we click on that, it brings us to another period screen. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see I want to, and under I want to, you'll have a choice to make a prepayment. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And this page is familiar. This is our payment page. In this scenario, I'm going to go ahead and pay by checking. And so let's go ahead and click that blue button on the left. Great. Takes us to our payment screen. And then we're going to select how we're making our payment, what our bank account type is, put in all the pertinent information requested. So we can go to the next screen here. And don't worry, this is not real banking information. I'm not sharing my Bank of America info with you. But this is where I'm going to put all the specifics for this payment and the amount I'm going to pay is $5,000. That is half of my fee owed. So as DTSC mentioned, it's not half of the $49.25. It's half of the fee that I owe. So if I generated 10 tons, for example, and I owe a total of $492.50, then my prepayment is going to be $246.25. In this scenario, our prepayment is $5,000. So we're going to go ahead and click submit, get our prepayment going here. Our declaration of intent will pop up again for us. We'll enter our password, click OK. And after we click OK, we're brought to the confirmation page again here. You can see that this says prepayment type 1, prepayment. So we have made our prepayment. We can print this as a PDF if we'd like. And that brings us to the end of the prepayment process. We do have several resources for you at CDTFA, and we can go to the next slide. And one of our major resources is the Hazardous Substances Waste Fee Guide. And we do have a tab, especially for you generators. It's called the Generation and Handling Fee tab. And then another great resource are our online services tutorials. And these are videos that tell you, talk you through how to file a return, how to log into the CDTFA's website, or make a prepayment on your generation and handling fee account. You can pause the video, go ahead and go through it at the same time, but they're great tutorials and we are updating them all the time to add value for you generators. I think that brings us to the end of our presentation at this time. And thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for waiting through the technical difficulties that we've been having. We appreciate you, and we know you all understand because you've probably been through a lot of this before in different scenarios. So we'll go ahead and maybe answer some questions at this time. I know we've had several coming in, so I'll go ahead and introduce my colleague. Maybe she can join me. With us, we have Rachel Zoe. She is also a business taxes specialist with CDTFA and the Tax Policy Bureau. So as we work out our technical challenges here, I'll ask her to share her screen, and then we'll go through some questions and answers that we have received recently. Are you ready, Rachel?
How do I share my?
I think you're good. I think you have the question screen on now, so I think we're good. I will just go ahead and ask questions if you're ready.
Go ahead, I'm ready.
Okay, so question 1 is that we received a generation and handling fee notice for the year 2022 waste from DTSC, and I'm wondering what I should do.
Hey, the notice you receive, I believe it's from DTSC, reminding you the tonnage you generated in year 2022 and your requirement to register and file return and pay the generation and handling fee with a CDTFA. So if you do not already have a CDTFA generation and handling fee account, register with us at www.cdtfa.ca.gov and click on the register button. And I believe on DTSC's notice, the second page also have our has a link to the registration page.
Thank you. Very good. Next question. We are the transporter of the waste. Do we owe the generation and handling fee? I believe DTSC covered this as well, but I'll give it to you for a quick answer, Rachel.
Sure. The company that hauls the waste has an EPA number. In order to transport the waste, it has to be manifest, but they're not the generator of the waste. The hauling company is not generating the waste and therefore would not be obligated to pay the generation and handling fee. The generators for whom they're hauling the waste, however, would each need to assess their individual circumstances to determine whether they have an obligation to pay the fee.
Thank you. The next question was, my business generated more than 5 tons of hazardous waste in 2023, and I closed my business the same year with no waste generated in 2024. Do I need to tell CDTFA that I'm no longer in business, and do I still owe the fee?
That's a good question. We assume you already have a generation and handling fee account with us. Since the business generated more than 5 tons of waste in 2023, the business is subject to the generation and handling fee for the calendar year 2023. The first of 2 equal payments for the waste generated in 2023 is due November 30th, 2024. And the return and the final payment is due February 28, 2025. Since the business closed out in 2023 with no waste generated in 2024, your business is not subject to the generation and handling fee for the year 2024. Yes, you need to inform us that you are no longer in business. When filing your generation and handling fee return for the waste generated in 2023, you will need to provide the last generation date so that we can process your closeout request.
Okay, and we had showed that field earlier when filing our return. Thank you. Another question was that I realized I did not make my prepayment on time. What should I do?
Yes, we do realize the prepayment link the prepayment link on your online filing after you log in will no longer be available after the prepayment due date, November 30th. But you can still log in and make your prepayment by clicking the make a payment link under I want to. And also under the payment type, select prepayment one when making your prepayment.
Thank you. Good information. So would I be penalized if I don't make that prepayment on time, or if I'm late?
Yes, a 10% penalty and applicable interest will be assessed after the return due date for any late or missed prepayment. And this would be same if you file your return late or make your second payment late, or you didn't file at all.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the questions that we had so far, but I know Gabby might have some more questions that she compiled. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gabby and the DTSC team for any additional Q&A.
Thank you, Angela. Yeah, we do have a few for CDTFA that came in advance. And so some of it has to do with the notices that the generators and fee payers received from our 2 departments. And so in this case, the generator says that they already paid the fee, and they want to know, are they being charged again? Were these notices because they had not paid? They're a little bit confused about the timing of them.
Okay, yeah, not necessarily. If they've like already paid their fee in full, then they may have a $0 balance when they do log into their CDTFA account. We recommend that they hang on to their receipt, the confirmation page that we showed, or proof of payment in case their account is audited. And they should also verify that they have filed their annual return timely.
Great. And the next question we had actually had to do with the penalties assessed for missing a prepayment. So I'm just going to skip that one because you and Rachel just covered that
Thanks. One. Okay.
Okay, so our next question to CDTFA is, does a generator have to file a return when they did not generate hazardous waste in the prior calendar year, but they are still registered with CDTFA?
Right. So the fee is due for hazardous waste generated in the prior calendar year. So if the generator did not generate hazardous waste in 22, they would not owe the fee this year that's coming due. However, if they generated waste previously and have not paid that waste yet, they would still owe that fee, and it may be incurring a penalty if they're late, and maybe interest for being overdue. I wanted to just put a reminder in here that they still need to file their return, even though no waste was generated, since the generator is already registered with CDTFA. So you can go ahead and come in, file your return with 0 tonnage, and then go ahead and complete the process and submit your return.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
return process and the payment process, even though it's done in the same sort of one fell swoop, they are sort of two different processes.
They can be, so you could complete your return and come back later to pay. So yes, when you log into your account, you should do both, right? File your return and pay at the same time. But if you're filing your return early and you want to come back and pay later, that is an option.
Okay, great. And the last question I have for CDTFA at the moment is, if a generator needs to pay for multiple EPA IDs, can they pay all the fees in one payment?
Yes. When you log in, you'll see the EPA IDs listed. As we went through the return, you could see them there or added. You may have added an EPA. If you have multiple accounts, you'll need to pay the fees owed under each account. So I think in our scenario, we did see 2 hazardous waste generation and handling fee accounts. And so you would need to go and click on both of those accounts and go ahead and complete the filing and payment for both.
All right. Well, thank you, Angela and Rachel, both for your presentation. We're just after 1 o'clock here. We do still have a lot of questions coming in. So I think at this point, if I could bring Kate and Cindy back, we'll come back to the DTSC questions, and might call you back, Angela and Rachel, if more questions come in for you. All righty. Awesome. Thank you for bringing up the slide. So we are done with our presentations for today. We are going to spend the rest of our time going over some of the questions that have been coming in. But as we wrap up, I also want to leave you with some contact information. So depending on your question, you have direct access to experts about EPQ, the hazardous waste tracking system, and about fees. So each of those topics have their own direct email access. And if you have general questions about the legislation, or if you're part of the media, you can contact my team at DTSC Legislation Office at dtsc.ca.gov, or you can contact one of our public information officers in our communications office. And so we have Alicia Pikitis email posted up here. And to our partners at CDTFA, if you want to contact them, they do have a webpage dedicated. It is a contact form, and so you can reach out to them. We could go to the next slide. And of course, if you're not sure who to contact, you can always use our form. The form that you've been using today during this webinar is continuing to be posted. It will be posted after today. It's where we're collecting all of your feedback. So we do want to continue hearing from you. We're tracking those questions. We want to make sure that we follow up with you. And actually, a lot of your questions are ones that other people are asking as well. So what we're doing is we're going to go back to this recording. We're going to go back to the questions that we keep receiving, and we're developing frequently asked questions. So there is a placeholder on our fees webpage for FAQs. That is something that is in development and will go live as soon as we finish working on this recording today. But your feedback is important, and I want to emphasize that what you tell us is helping to improve the way that we serve you. So before we get back into the questions, I do just want to emphasize this form is active now. You can take your phone out, you can scan the QR code. If you're joining us by computer, you can type in the link that's shown on the screen into your browser. And we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can during this session. We do still have a lot left over from when DTSC was presenting earlier. So we're going to start with those questions first. And if time allows, we'll keep working our way through the queue. If we don't get to everything today, or if you have questions that are about your specific circumstances, we'll do our best to reach out to you individually, and we will try to answer your questions one-on-one. So with that, if Kate and Cindy are ready, we can go back to some of the questions that we had from earlier. Just give us a moment to get ready for that. So Kate, I think this first question might be for you.
Okay.
All righty. So the generation and handling fee resulted in much higher fees than the old generator fee. Some people want to know, was it meant to be punitive?
Oh, that's a great question. No, absolutely not. It's important to remember that the generation and handling fee actually replaced more than just the generator fee. It also replaced three other fees: the disposal fee, the manifest fee, and the EPID fees. The purpose of the G&H fee is not to be punitive, but to ensure that DTSC has sufficient funding to support our regulatory activities required under law, and so that we can help protect communities and the environment. That's our mission here at DTSC. Under the old generator fee, some generators could pay as much as $100 per ton, whereas some generators, our very largest generators, paid under $10 per ton. Fee reform was simply meant to fund DTSC's operations, which had been operating in a structural deficit for years, in a more fair fee framework than we had previously.
Got it. So the more hazardous waste that someone generated, the less they paid per ton.
Exactly. It was simpler for generators to calculate their fees in the old fee structure because it was a tiered structure. So you only paid the rate applicable to the range of tonnage you generated. So their tonnage fell into, kind of determine the rate. But those rates didn't adequately fund DTSC's oversight and hazardous waste management activities, or provide DTSC or CDTFA the detailed information we need about the waste generated, so that we can ensure generators pay appropriately.
Got it. And is that why the annual return is more detailed this year?
Yes, that's exactly why. This year, the return asked for a breakdown of tonnage generated by EPID, as you saw in CDTFA's presentation. It also asked the generator to identify any exemptions they're claiming. This new information will help DTSC reconcile the hazardous waste generation data with the fees paid to CDTFA. The goal is to make sure generators are paying their fair share, respective to the amount of waste they're generating.
Okay, so tell us more about the hazardous waste generated in 2022 versus 2021 or 2023. If a generator paid for 2022 waste already, will they have to pay again this year?
So the only year that should have been paid on twice this calendar year is waste generated in calendar year 2021. And that's because that has to do with the calendar year 2021 waste was paid both the generator fee in the old fee structure, and then the first year under the new fee structure for generation and handling fee. However, we did observe that a lot of generators paid on calendar year waste 2022 last year. As I mentioned in my presentation, that's incorrect. You will need to work with CDTFA to amend your return. So to avoid paying twice on 22 waste and to make sure you paid appropriately last year for calendar year 2021 waste, you should check your account and, if necessary, amend your return with CDTFA for last year. And of course, CDTFA is also available to assist with your specific account situation.
Got it. Okay. So going back to the change in the fee structure briefly, and the new generation and handling fee, some generators have noticed they're paying significantly more than they were under the old fee, 2, 3, even 4 times as much. Was it really necessary to increase the fee by that much?
It's difficult to quantify and compare fees in a generalized manner, not only because the generation and handling fee replaced 4 fees, but also because under the old structure, the generator paid fees within a cap tier system, and for each of those fees, they had their own fee framework. So while large generators are likely to pay much more this year, smaller generators are likely to pay less. To make a year-over-year comparison, I would need to look at how much waste an organization generated in both years. Ultimately, this new funding model ensures stronger protections for people living and working in the vicinity of hazardous waste generators, because it enables DTSC to provide more inspections and enforcement actions. This model also gives us much more precise understanding of the waste generated in California, which will help inform future discussions around the state's pending hazardous waste management plan, which is due to the Board of Environmental Safety next year in 2020.
Okay, so let's go back to exemptions for a moment. We have some government entities joining us today, and they've been asking about the government exemption. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So current law provides that the hazardous waste that results when a government entity or its contractor removes or remedies a release of hazardous waste is exempted from the generation and handling fee if it was caused by someone else. This exemption is not a categorical exemption for all government entities. For example, when a government agency cleans up a spill, it's not required to pay the fee. However, a government entity is responsible for paying the generation and handling fee when they are themselves the generator of the hazardous waste. For instance, when a government entity is remodeling its facilities, say they're abating asbestos in their building, the government must pay that generation and handling fee and would not qualify for the exemption. If a government agency isn't sure if they qualify for that exemption, they should reach out to DTSC. You can reach out to my fees inbox at dtsc.ca.gov. And then, of course, CDTFA also provides a fee appeal process as well.
Okay, this one's a little bit more specific. You mentioned a few different exemptions, and under the old system, there was an exemption for agricultural commissioners. Are they still exempt under this new fee?
So agricultural commissioners are not specifically mentioned with regard to the generation and handling fee. However, Health and Safety Code does provide an exemption for eligible participants submitting banned, outdated, or unregistered agricultural waste to a registered collection program. That being said, statute also requires the county who's implementing that collection program to charge eligible participants a fee to cover the county's cost of implementing the program.
Okay, but that's a different fee than the G&H fee.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. All right, so are permanent facilities exempt from paying the fee if they're already paying a facility fee?
That's a great question, because under the generator fee, if you paid the facility fee, you are not required to pay the generator fee. But under the generation and handling fee, facilities are not exempt from paying the fee. They are, however, allowed to deduct some waste if they meet certain criteria. So the Health and Safety Code allows facilities with a standardized or full RCRA or RCRA equivalent permit to pay the facility fee, that do pay the facility fee, to deduct from their total tonnage the waste that's either stored, bulk, or transferred solely through the permitted facility, so long as it's a destined facility that manages the waste through either the reclamation and recovery, destruction or treatment before disposal at another site, treatment of the waste, or disposal of the waste.
Okay. Can you give an example of what waste would be exempt from the fee because it's recycled and reused on site?
Sure. So if a generator is recycling or reusing a hazardous waste on site, it would need to meet certain statutory and regulatory requirements to be exempt from the fee. For example, a spent solvent that is recycled or reused on site would be exempt from the fee. If they're still not sure, you can reach out to DTSC's Regulatory Assistance Office to discuss their specific situation further.
Okay, what about on-site treatment of hazardous waste?
Yeah, so pursuant to Health and Safety Code, not sure what it is, but the Health and Safety Code, aqueous waste that's treated on site at a permit by rule, conditionally authorized, or conditionally exempt is excluded from the fee. There's no change from the generation or from the generator fee. Aqueous waste that's treated at a standardized or full permit facility is not provided that statutory exemption and is therefore required to pay the generation and handling fee. All waste that is not aqueous and treated on site is subject to the fee. DTSC understands that for full and standardized permit facilities, this is a change from the requirements under the generator fee. However, SB 158 did not provide a statutory exclusion.
Okay, we're switching gears from permanent facilities to now cleanup projects. We have some project proponents with us today that are working on cleanups around the state. When it comes to contaminated soil, if they're not the generator, they didn't cause the soil to be contaminated, are they responsible for paying the fee?
So There are many different scenarios in which a generator might generate contaminated soil. If, for example, the waste is generated as part of a construction project, that generator is subject to the fee when they dig up that waste, even if they did not originally cause the soil to be contaminated, and even if the contaminant is naturally occurring. They are generating the hazardous waste in the course of their project and are therefore responsible for managing it properly. This includes paying the fee for that waste.
Got it. Do you have any specific examples, or is it really so case dependent that a generator should just reach out?
Yeah, I would recommend for more, specific examples. It's so case specific, as you said, to reach out with our technical team after this webcast. Again, there's also the Regulatory Assistance Office that's available as well.
Okay. It looks like, Cindy, we have a few more for you. So for some people, this is the first time they've generated hazardous waste, and so they're new to paying for a fee for it. What's the first step for someone who's new to this program?
So if they generated hazardous waste over 5 tons during the 2022 calendar year, they would have received initial notices from DTSC and CDTFA. DTSC, we sent out our notices June 2023, and then this month. And then CDTFA sent out a special notice in November 2023 to registered taxpayers. These notices went out to alert the generators of their responsibility to pay the fee this fiscal year, and to verify their business information in EVQ. Kate, would you be able to speak a little bit more about the fee itself?
Sure. So thanks, Cindy. The generator would need to create an account with CDTFA and verify their manifest information in HWTS. If the information is correct and the tonnage they generated is greater than 5 tons, the generator is responsible for paying the prepayment in November 2023 and the final payment, and well, filing the return next month in February. However, regardless of whether or not you received a notice, a generator is responsible for managing and tracking their hazardous waste. If you generated more than 5 tons of applicable hazardous waste, manifested or not, you are required to pay fees and file a return with CDTFA.
All right. So you've gone over a lot of information, cited several statutes, regulations, even some came up in the Q&A. Is this information summarized somewhere so it's easier to find?
Yes. So each year DTSC publishes an annual fee summary, which distills the information so it's easier to reference. You can find it on our website. We have a page specifically dedicated to fees. It's also available in the PDF form at dtsc.ca.gov /fees /
Okay. Okay, so kind of back to you, Cindy. What can the generator do in the EVQ system when it's open versus when it's, what's the difference, and when do they usually open and close?
When the EVQ system's open, so the generator can access their verification questionnaire and the different steps to verify the information associated with the ID number. So that includes owner and contact information and their manifest data, and then any necessary changes can be made. They also have the ability to reactivate or inactivate a respective ID number when the system's open. And then after the user has completed the verification questionnaire, they can still go into their EVQ account to update their profile information. When the system's closed, they can no longer access the questionnaire or their EVQ account. And then I mentioned in my presentation earlier that the EVQ report cycle typically opens in July or after. And then we'll leave it open. Like last cycle, we closed the end of last year. Sometimes we have left it open up until the following year in February or March. So this is dependent on the number of enhancements that we have to make, and then we always do routine maintenance as well. I included this in my EVQ resource slide. So if you want to learn more about EVQ, you can go to our webpage at evq.dtsc.ca.gov.
Okay, and I don't know if this is more of a fee question or more of an EPA ID question. So does a generator still have to pay the fee if they have a temporary or an inactive EPA ID?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So fees are due for all hazardous waste generated, regardless of whether or not you have a temporary or permanent state ID. So it's irrespective of your ID status, meaning even if you have an inactive EPA ID, you still are required to pay the fee if you generated 5 or more tons of hazardous waste in a calendar year.
Okay, so the generation and handling fee is not our only fee, though. We have a few questions here. It looks like about the environmental fee. Who pays that one?
That's a great question. So the environmental fee is a tiered fee assessed on nearly all businesses in California with 100 or more employees who work 500 or more hours in a prior year. If a business uses computers, tablets, laptops, cell phones, it's likely subject to the environmental fee. There are very few, limited exemptions, such as private households, insurance companies that pay taxes on those premiums, banks that pay taxes on net income, nonprofit credit unions, and U.S. government entities. Those are pretty much the only exemptions within the fee. The application of the environmental fee is based on the Employment Development Department's records, and it's also administered and collected by CDTFA.
Got it. Okay, so this looks like it's coming back to the generation handling fee. How do we calculate annual waste tonnage per site if it's less than 5 tons per year? And if so, what's the most accurate way to calculate this? Is it from manifest?
Great question. So generators are responsible for tracking hazardous waste generated at their site, regardless of whether the hazardous waste is required to be manifested or not, for purposes of accurately accounting for the total amount of hazardous waste they generated in a year. They should also rely on their records to confirm the accuracy of the information they report on their fee returns. Generators are also responsible for the accuracy of their records in various reporting systems, such as HWTS, EVQ, CQR, URED, and others. So I just kind of want to note, generators are responsible for tracking this information, regardless of whether or not they are subject to the generation fee.
Okay, so in terms of what is subject to the fee or not, are shipments of waste that are exported for the purposes of recycling subject to the fee?
Yeah, if it's a hazardous waste generated and manifested in California, it's typically subject to the fee, even if the waste is exported out of the country. The only exception would be if the waste is eligible for the recycling exclusion, which in this case would not be manifested because it would be identified as an excluded recyclable material.
Okay, so that sounds like a pretty clear delineation, at least in that case.
Correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so a generator noted they received a letter stating the hazardous waste tracking system showed the higher manifested tonnage compared to their records in 2022. How do they correct this? I think this is one for Cindy.
Gabby, it's a higher manifested tonnage. Is that correct?
Yeah, it looks like in the letter that they received, there was a certain amount of waste that was indicated, but their own records are actually lower than that. And I'm going to assume that means it tips them into the under 5 tons kind of category.
So that, we do have instances of that happening. So I would say in email manifest corrections, and then in the email provide your hazardous waste ID number, the manifest tracking numbers with the incorrect tonnage, and then what the corrected tonnage should be, and any supporting documentation to support the correct tonnage. And then from there, the analyst will research the issue and provide you with next steps. And the reason for that is that each manifest correction case is different. So it's not always, sometimes it's quick and easy to resolve, and then others may take more research and time.
Got it. Okay. Kate, I think this one might be to you. I'm seeing a few comments coming in that sound like there's waste generated from a cleanup project. I know we talked a little bit earlier about contaminated soil, but for waste that's generated in a cleanup project, it seems that's still subject to the fee.
That's correct, yes. If a project generates hazardous waste, it is still subject to the fee, provided it does not qualify for any of the exemptions we discussed earlier for today.
Okay, and so maybe this isn't a cleanup project specifically, but when a facility closes and they're generating waste as a result of that closure, it's above and beyond what they typically generate. Is that also subject to the fee?
Yes, that waste is still subject to the fee unless the waste is eligible for a specific exemption or exclusion.
Okay, let's see. So this one's more of a comment than a question. This generator went through the manifest corrections process and paying the fee, and they didn't have a great experience. They suggest changing the process to make it easier for generators to understand the fees, and so that they can pay it on time. So if maybe Cindy, you want to talk about that? It's manifest corrections.
Okay. So first of all, sorry to hear that you felt the process was unclear and time consuming. Definitely want to hear your suggestions to streamline the data confirmation process. Oftentimes, we're not seeing it, or because we're not the one like filing the fee and having to verify the data. I guess I'll say is that I'm so close to the system, that maybe sometimes we may not be seeing the obvious. So with the exception of translation errors, if the manifest data was incorrect in HWTS, it most likely was submitted incorrectly in the federal e-manifest system, because that's where we upload manifest data in HWTS from. So any feedback that you have to help us to improve the process for yourself and the next person, definitely open to hearing your feedback.
Okay, so I'm hearing it's critical that the generator verifies the information was captured accurately, and I think it's RCRA info. Is that the e-manifest system?
Yes, e-manifest is a module within the RCRA info system.
Got it. Okay.
That's also referred to as e-manifest system as well, too.
Got it. Okay. And I also want to echo your willingness to hear feedback and suggestions. We've been hearing from a lot of stakeholders about their experiences with the generation handling fee, that it is harder for them to calculate their fees, that they're not sure about how the change from the old fee structure to the new one is supposed to be implemented. And we really want to hear more of these conversations over the coming months. So for those of you who are watching today, please do sign up for our e-list. We're also going to reply back based on the registration list in the Zoom webinar links to make sure that we reach out to you. But sign up for our e-list and stay tuned for some more interactions with us. Okay, so after my little plug for that, let's talk about EPA IDs a little bit more. I heard today that temporary IDs and permanent IDs are two different things. Can you say a little bit more? What's the difference, or how does someone know which one to apply for?
Okay. So temporary IDs, they're valid for 90 days from the date of issuance, and they're used for one-time or short-term events, such as the removal of asbestos waste. Even if an activity occurs sporadically, like once a year, we would require for you to get a permanent ID number. And then a permanent ID number, whether to get, so there's two different types. You have temporary and permanent, and then you have state or federal, which is the EPA. The type of ID that you would get would be based on the amount and type of waste you're generating. And then we do have more information on the DTSC web pages. It's under apply for an ID number. Then we also have a call center. The number is 800-618-6942. If you need more guidance, you can reach out to us.
Okay. So what happens when a company contact person changes and that new contact person needs to complete EBQ? If the first person's no longer with the company and someone has to take over the EBQ account, what should they do?
First step, I would you could call or email us. So we have the EVQ line, and I had shared that in the slide. It's the 877 number. And then in the email or when you contact us is have the, it's helpful if you have the ID number. You may not always know the username. If you do, that's great. We will have you verify some of the information on the account before we replace your email address as the primary or the alternate contact, so that when the EVQ notice, when we send out EVQ notifications, that you'll receive a notification. The other option, again, depending on how we want to go about it, is that we could release the ID numbers and then just have you create another account, another EVQ account, just to start fresh. But I guess that depends on the number of ID numbers. Usually that's easier if you have like a few ID numbers, but if you have multiple or you want to just keep that same account, that's fine too. I'll say start with, send us an email at evq@dtsc.ca.gov or call the EVQ helpline.
Okay. There's still a few more coming in about EVQ. What if a business believes it didn't generate waste in 2022, but our HWTS records show they did? Are they required to complete the EVQ verification? Sounds like probably.
So it depends on if the ID number was active during the previous fiscal year. So if it was active at any time, they'd still be required to complete the EVQ. And then if they didn't generate wet waste and need to deactivate the ID, they could do so in EVQ because we have that option to deactivate or inactivate. And then that's a good thing. Again, as I shared about like businesses, if they're closing, make sure to deactivate the ID number after the waste has been removed and transported to the receiving facility so that they're not included in the following year's EVQ cycle. And then if you believe that your manifest records are incorrect, contact manifest corrections at dtsc.ca.gov.
Got it. So for I guess correcting EVQ to inactivate or deactivate, we're between the two cycles now, right? So they would have to wait until it reopens?
No, they don't. So when the EVQ cycles close, they can request to reactivate and deactivate through the respective form.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. So it sounds like an EPID will become inactive if EVQ is not completed. What if that was a mistake? What if they just missed the EVQ cycle?
And, that does happen where sometimes they don't see the notice or sometimes our notices may have gone to their spam. We do deactivate ID numbers that are required to report in the EVQ. I mean, we deactivate ID numbers if they were required to report, but they didn't. But I will say we don't do that. So EVQ is due 30 days from the date they receive the first notification, but we do send out subsequent notifications to remind, our stakeholders. So I think we give at least like 3 or 4 months, but before we actually do the deactivation. For example, last report cycle, we didn't deactivate ID numbers until it was either end of October or November 1st. And again, I just want for everyone to know is that our goal is not, to deactivate ID numbers, but to help you to be in compliance. That's part of it because it's required. But after we deactivate, the cycle's still open where you could go back in and easily reactivate your ID number. Unfortunately, if you missed the previous EVQ's report cycle, our system doesn't have that functionality to let you go back in to file it. So just make sure that you file it for the current report cycle year so that it could be active. And then Gabby, as you had mentioned, is that we're in between cycles right now. So again, if your ID number's been inactivated because of non-completion of the EVQ, we do have information on our EVQ homepage about that. And then if you have additional questions, you could email the EVQ email address.
Okay, great. Okay, so going back to the federal RCRA info system, we have a couple questions about how, let's see. The first one's about updating the contact person for the ID number. So not in EVQ this time, but how do you update the contact in RCRA info?
First, let me put a little plug-in for the federal RCRA info system. If you are a hazardous waste handler, if you have manifest data, and you have not registered for a RCRA info account, I definitely encourage you to, so that you have access to your data in there. And then, so for this question, we do have it. So my unit, we have like 10 different email inboxes. And so if you go on HWTS, the homepage, and there's a contact icon, and you'll see a list of all the inboxes with the respective topics that we cover. So if you forget, so the email address for RCRA info topics is myRCRAID@dtsc.ca.gov. You can send an email with your ID number, and then let us know who should be the correct contact for that ID number. We'll research any discrepancies and then get back to you with a solution, provide you with instructions on what to do.
Got it. Okay, so let's say Generator has been working with one of our analysts on this, but they're getting stuck trying to register with RCRA info. Is there any advice that you can provide on how to get unstuck?
Yes. So RCRA info has two sites. One is the pre-production site, and then one is the production. So you definitely want to make sure you're on the production site. And then we do have a RCRA training video. If you run a search in DTSC's webpage, My RCRA ID or training video. If you have additional questions, again, you can email My RCRA ID. What's helpful is if you provide screenshots, of the error message or the page that you're stuck on, that will help. And if needed, we can also, if you're not able to, or it only happens, sporadically, this error, we could even do a screen share session if needed. So then also just make sure that you're registering for an industry user account if you're not a regulator, because there's two. You could register for industry or a regulatory agency one. And then we do see a handful of industry people registering for the incorrect one. And then, we reject it and then tell them to register for the industry one. And then again, we have our 800 number, 800-618-6942 that they can also call as well too for assistance.
Okay. Let's talk about HWTS again. So if there are corrections in HWTS that are not related to manifest, what should the generator do for a contact person?
Okay. I mentioned this in my presentation earlier. So for non-manifest information that needs to be corrected, so examples are if there's typo, in your site name or information just associated with the ID number, like the mailing address, or you can email HWTS and ADM, like Mike N, like November, at dtsc.ca.gov. Let us know what's incorrect. And again, some fixes are like quick and easy, and then others may have you fill out an application, but we'll let you know. We'll provide you with that guidance.
Okay, so let's see. Since household hazardous waste collection centers are exempt from the generation handling fee, they still report into EVQ.
So household hazardous waste collection centers. So yes, they will need to report starting in the 2024 EVQ report cycle. We do acknowledge that this is a shift from previous EVQ reporting cycles because household hazardous waste ID numbers with a lettered prefix of CAH have been excluded. So EVQ is no longer used to assess fees, and will serve as a way to verify waste generation activity. And even if the waste that the entity generated is exempt, generators are still required to submit this information per the statute. And this is separate from other local and state requirements.
Okay. Let's see. Kate, I think this one is to you. today in the webinar, let's see. How do you calculate the fee? So in this case, we have a generator who generated 5.5 tons of waste. And if they paid at $49.25 per ton, that would equate to nearly $300. But their understanding was that the first 5 tons are free. So why not less than that?
So that's a great question. So the first 5 tons are not free. The fee is applicable to any generators who generate 5 or more tons, but that just means you generated more than 5, so you're subject to the fee. It does not indicate that the 5 you originally generated is free. It's not. The fee is assessed on a per ton or fraction of a ton basis for all generators who generate 5 or more tons. And the fee applies to the total of hazardous waste generated in a calendar year, not just the amount over the 5 tons.
Okay. And then we have a follow-up question about the natural disaster exemption. Does it apply to things like a house fire or like if a pipe breaks and there's water damage?
Yeah, so that's a tough question because the natural disaster exemption has many specific requirements outlined in our California Code of Regulations. I think it's 66269.2. These include that the natural disaster exemption only applies to hazardous waste generated in areas that have been identified on an emergency proclamation by the governor when a property owned or controlled by the victim is damaged or destroyed as a result of the disaster. The hazardous waste must be disposed of within 1 year of the date of the emergency proclamation.
So this would be like when we have those big wildfires up north.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Okay, so back to asbestos abatement. Is the generator the abatement company or is it the homeowner who hired the abatement company?
Yeah, so the homeowner would be the generator in this scenario.
Okay. And let's see, if a generator pays the CUPA permit fee, can this fee be deducted from the total hazardous waste generation fee?
So that's a great question. No, the CUPA permit fee is separate. It's a separate fee administered by your local CUPA and covers that local CUPA's oversight activities. The generation and handling fee is what covers DTSC's oversight. So they are treated as separate fees.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. Another one for you, Kate. When accounting for waste generated, do we include all sites in America or just those in California?
The fee is only assessed on waste generated in California.
Okay. Let's see. Sorry, so we're at 1:43. I'm gonna do a quick time check. If you could all bear with us, we have a lot of questions coming in. Some of them appear to be follow-up, some of them are on some topics we've covered already. Let's take a 5-minute break so that our team on the back end can sift through some of these questions and see if there are any more that we can cover in the last few minutes together. So I'm gonna have everyone go off camera for just a few minutes. We'll return at, we'll call it 5 minutes, so 1:49. We'll be back soon. Alrighty. Thank you everyone for your patience. There are a lot of questions coming in. We just wanted to take a moment to scan through them and see what we could bring up to webcast sharing. Angela, if you could come on camera, we're getting some questions about paying by check. I know you covered this a little bit in your slides, but could you reiterate how someone can pay by check?
Right. So once you file online, there is definitely an option to print a voucher and go ahead and send the voucher along with your paper check. We usually use the mailing date on the check, so whatever the post office puts on the check as the date the check was sent. But we can also take checks for prepayments. You'd still have to file your prepayment online. So let us know, that you're doing that. But you could send your paper check for prepayments for sure. And then make sure that you put your account number on that check in the memo section. That way it will actually get applied to the correct generation and handling fee account. So we do accept paper checks. Yes.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you, paper checks are accepted as long as you have your account number listed so that it goes to the right payment.
Right.
But electronic is easier, maybe a little bit more efficient.
Yes, correct. And the payment will post sooner.
Okay,
Correct.
got it. And actually, just as a quick follow-up question, I'm not sure if you'll have this answer or if you'll have to take it back to your team, but if someone does pay by check in the mail, they wouldn't have a confirmation page necessarily to have as their proof of payment. Will they be notified that the check was received, or is this kind of like paying your taxes to the federal IRS where you just pay and you hope for the best?
Right. Well, for the return, so that's the second installment, right? So generators are actually required to file online. So they would need to go through that process, complete and submit the return. And they'd be given an option at the end of that return on the confirmation page to print the voucher, and they need to send the voucher and the check at the same time. For the prepayment, as I mentioned, you can mail in a paper check. And just you'd need to put your generation and handling fee account number with CDTFA on that check.
Okay, great. I think we have time for one more question. Kate, I'm going to turn to you for this one. If a generator they're looking back at their records for 2023 and they say they didn't generate more than 5 tons, can they assume that they're not going to have to pay for the fee in 2024? Are they going to still hear from DTSC or CDTFA?
They may still hear from both CDTFA and DTSC. Typically, when we send out our notices, we do filter them for generators who generated less or more than 5 tons. But as CDTFA noted, if you're registered with them and you previously generated more than 5 tons and had to file a return, you will still have to file a return with them, even if it's a $0 return. That being said, if they generated less than 5 tons, well, they may not be subject to the G&H fee. If they are permitted through DTSC, they would have to pay their facility fee, and then, of course, whatever local fees associated with them as well.
Got it. And I'm not actually sure if this is for Kate or CDTFA, but I think it goes with saying, or it should be said anyway, that we've really focused only on your accounts as it relates to the generation and handling fee today. But CDTFA, you manage a lot of different types of fees, you manage lots of different accounts. So if a generator, if a fee payer has other account types, they should really look to the requirements for those specific accounts, right? Like what we talked about today isn't necessarily applicable to all other account types.
Yes, I agree. Gabby, good point. Thank you.
Okay, great. I know we still have 7 minutes left in our time together. A lot of the questions that are coming in are very generator specific, and we want to make sure that we're being responsive to each of you for those specific situations. So I'm actually going to take this time just to reiterate some of the information we shared today. And we're not going to do any more Q&A at this point because I want to turn our team's attention to be able to follow up with you individually as needed. We are partnering closely with CDTFA, so although the form is listed on DTSC's webpage, we will be communicating with CDTFA to make sure if they can answer the questions more carefully than DTSC can. We want to make sure that our subject matter experts over there can handle them. For today's webinar, again, thank you so much for all of your patience as we dealt with some technical difficulties earlier today. Moving to the webcasting system was somewhat unexpected for us, and it's a new platform for me personally to facilitate on. So I know it was not the smoothest interaction for us today, but I think all in all, it went okay. We did record this on both the Zoom webinar platform and on the webcasting platform. So we are going to take a look at both of those. We're going to make sure that the information is coming through clear and not blurry. That was some of the feedback that we're seeing come in the comments. So we're going to make sure that when you go back to the recording, that it's useful to you and that you can understand what information is being conveyed. So it'll take us a little bit of time to process the recording and to post it online, but it will be available. We will post the slides probably before the recording is ready, so at least you have that to reference. We do already have a generation and handling fee overview handout that's available and posted already. And after we hang up, you'll be getting an email from us with a quick survey. One of the questions is, how was your experience logging into the webinar? We understand it was challenging for a lot of people. We still want to hear that so that we can adjust how we provide these services in the future. I also mentioned today that we've been hearing a lot about the generation handling fee and the implementation of fee reform. We do still want to have those conversations with you. We want to hear from you, and we plan on reaching out in the coming months. So stay tuned, sign up for our e-list so that you are up to date on any events that we're going to have, because we want to involve you. We want to hear from you. We want to make sure that this is working for you as well. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. This was a long session with us, and we appreciate all the time that you've given us today. I'm sure you'll hear from us again in the future as we get closer to the February 28th final payment and final return deadline. And if you have any questions in the meantime, we'll make ourselves available to you. There are a lot of different contact information and different ways that you can get a hold of us. But as I mentioned earlier, if you're just not sure, you have this QR code, you have this link in front of you. You can always access us through those entry points, and we'll make sure that we connect you to the right experts. So with that, we will say our goodbyes, and we'll see you in the near future. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.